The peaceful Kanagawa Prefecture in Yokohama City is thrown into chaos by the appearance of a kaiju, estimated to be 60 meters long with a fortitude level of 3.5. People scramble to safety as security officials guide them to shelters. Meanwhile, those not in immediate danger watch the live reports on their phones, speculating which division of the defense force will come to the city's rescue. One person confidently claims it'll be Division 3 since the kaiju is in Yokohama. Captain Mina Ashiro of Division 3 and her team arrive on the scene, scaling walls and firing at the kaiju. Mina gets close and takes a final shot at the kaiju's belly, causing it to explode from the inside out. Kafka Hibino, the self-proclaimed loser and unremarkable protagonist, shows up with his team to clean up the kaiju's remains, while Mina and her team bask in the cheers of the citizens for another casualty-free victory. During the cleanup, a tech team collects kaiju samples from Kafka. One cleanup team member gets injured by a hazardous part of the kaiju, and Kafka rushes to help, recalling his own past carelessness. After treating the injured member, the captain reassigns Kafka to handle the kaiju's intestines. Reluctantly, Kafka takes on the messiest part of the job, unable to say no. Later that night, Kafka struggles with the after effects of cutting through intestines, but is distracted when the news highlights Mina. He reminisces about the time they vowed to fight kaiju together. Kafka turns off the TV, deciding he's had enough of the 27-year-old captain. Still, he can't stop wondering why things turned out so differently. He consoles himself, thinking that having a place to sleep, food to eat, and contributing to society is good enough. The next day, Kafka arrives at work with a pounding headache. His teammate Toku introduces him to Ichikawa, a new recruit who dreams of joining the defense force, just like Kafka once did. Ichikawa is disappointed to hear Kafka gave up on his dreams. Kafka explains he realized others were better suited for it, adding that Ichikawa will understand someday. Ichikawa insists he'll never give up, making Kafka feel a twinge of jealousy as he questions whether giving up is really so bad. On day 2 of cleanup duty, Kafka and Ichikawa are assigned to the intestines again. The captain praises Kafka's skill with the task, adding that he could have excelled in the defense force if he hadn't given up. After a round of work, Kafka notices Ichikawa struggling with the gruesome task and offers him multivitamins and nose blocks. Ichikawa refuses the nose blocks, prompting Kafka to chase after him. The team eventually wraps up for the day, but Kafka stays behind. Ichikawa returns to thank Kafka for helping him get through his first day of work, and takes the opportunity to inform him that the defense force has extended the age limit for applicants to 32, meaning Kafka can still apply if he wants. Kafka thanks Ichikawa for his kindness, but the moment is ruined by the appearance of a yoju, a variant of a kaiju, which nearly bites Ichikawa. Kafka jumps in just in time to save him. He tells Ichikawa to run away, since Kafka wants to join the defense force and it wouldn't make sense for him to die there. He also instructs Ichikawa to report the yoju once he's safe, and Ichikawa takes off. Kafka distracts the yoju and runs as fast as his out-of-shape legs can carry him. He dashes into a building, clutching an iron rod, hoping the yoju can't follow. He leaps out of a glass window on the other side, cutting his face in the process. Kafka flashes back to the day his city was attacked by kaiju, when he and Mina lost their home and schools. They decided to join the defense force and compete to see who'd make the cooler team member. The yoju isn't done with Kafka, catching up to him on the other side of the building. Kafka remembers the rule to strike a kaiju's leg when it attacks, but he lacks the strength to do it. The yoju slams Kafka to the ground, leaving him helpless as ever. Just as the yoju is about to swallow Kafka, Ichikawa shows up. Kafka asks why he came back instead of running, and Ichikawa says he couldn't escape alone Itoing, so would mean he'd never make the defense team. He had already reported the yoju before returning. Kafka is frustrated with himself for being unable to save anything. He screams in anger, and Mina arrives with her tiger to distract the yoju while she kills it. She assigns her teammates to care for Kafka and Ichikawa, pretending not to know Kafka. Mina leaps away with her tiger, saying she'll check for other yoju in the area. In the hospital bed, Kafka acknowledges Mina's incredible strength, but also feels a bit cool when Ichikawa, on the other side of the curtain in the same ward, thanks him for saving his life. Ichikawa encourages Kafka not to give up, and this time, Kafka agrees to try his luck again for a spot in the defense force. Luck isn't on Kafka's side though. When he looks up, he sees a kaiju, and before he can scream, it enters him. Ichikawa stands up to find Kafka has transformed into a kaiju, causing both of them to scream. An old man walking by the hospital ward reports Kafka. Mina receives a call in her bathtub after recalling Kafka's broken promise to be by her side when she fights a kaiju that scares her. The call informs her that a kaiju has appeared at Yokohama South General Hospital, and she promises to eliminate it with her team. Mina used to believe that with Kafka by her side, there was nothing to fear when they were younger. But now, she's discussing with her team members about the new kaiju that's appeared at the hospital, insisting they defeat it before there are any casualties. Ichikawa and Kafka, the new kaiju, struggle to convince the patients that Kafka is still the same pathetic loser he's always been. Kafka's smile unnerves them, and his attempt to apologize ends up destroying the hospital walls. Ichikawa suggests they escape, and Kafka breaks the window to make their getaway. Division 3 members learn that the kaiju has left the hospital and is heading toward an evacuated isolated area. While on the run, Ichikawa wonders how, why, and when Kafka became a kaiju. He even questions if Kafka is truly a kaiju, but all doubts vanish when he looks back and sees a strange mutation on Kafka, who also eats a bird alive. Shortly after, Kafka reverts to his initial kaiju form and tells Ichikawa he needs to pee and can't hold it, even though he has no idea where the pee will come from. It ends up ejecting from his chest, leaving Kafka devastated by what he's become. He lies on the ground and asks Ichikawa if he can still join the defense force. Ichikawa doesn't hesitate to tell him he can't because they'll kill him the moment they see him. Ichikawa tells Kafka he has other things to worry about and leads him to a cordoned-off area where they can stay without people around. However, Kafka senses the presence of a yoju and hesitates. Mina receives a phone call informing her about another kaiju's presence. She sends one car to follow Kafka while her bus heads to the new location. Ichikawa tells Kafka to hurry, since the appearance of a new kaiju means fewer people will be after him. A little girl tries to save her mother, who's trapped under a collapsed building. The mother urges the girl to run, but she refuses to leave without her. The girl tries to lift the heavy wall, crushing her mother, but her strength isn't enough. The yoju spots the girl and her mother. It breaks the building further for a clearer view and attempts to eat the girl alive, but Kafka arrives and punches the yoju. Kafka tries to calm the girl, but even his appearance frightens her, and his dangerous kaiju smile makes it hard to connect. Ichikawa steps in to help, speaking to the girl while Kafka lifts the heavy wall off her mother. The girl is scared, something is wrong with her unconscious mother, but Ichikawa reassures her that her mother will wake up once she gets to the hospital. The yoju returns, and Kafka tells Ichikawa to help the mother and daughter escape. Curiosity gets the best of Ichikawa, who asks Kafka what he plans to do. Kafka clenches his fist and says he wants to punch the yoju as hard as he can. Carrying the mother on his back, Ichikawa holds the girl and tells her to brace herself as they move back to give Kafka space. The yoju opens its mouth wide enough to swallow Kafka whole, but Kafka gathers all his strength and delivers a powerful punch, causing the yoju to explode into 1,000,000 pieces, raining blood over Kafka. Ichikawa is stunned by what has happened, and warns Kafka not to punch a human like that. Kafka tries to talk to the little girl, but she hides from him, and he starts to walk away. The girl stops him and thanks him, which makes Kafka remember his past relationship with little Mina. Kafka reaffirms his decision not to give up on joining the defense force as he transforms his head back to normal, but Ichikawa insists they need to leave since he's called an ambulance. Mina and her team are baffled by what they find at the kaiju's location. She approaches the little girl and asks her to describe the kaiju she saw, but the girl is too scared to even think about it. Mina vows to kill all the kaiju, and the girl gains enough courage to ask if Mina will spare the good kaiju that saved her mother. 3 months after the incident, kaiju number 8, the label given to Kafka's type of kaiju, remains undiscovered as the cleanup team watches the news. The cleanup team captain hands Ichikawa 2 letters sewn for him and 1 for Kafka. The team worries they'll have to console Kafka again, as they do every year when the Defense Force exam results come out. Ichikawa confirms he passed the first round of his exam and offers to give Kafka his letter. On the way to the site, since Kafka arrived earlier, Ichikawa checks Kafka's letter, and the team assumes Kafka passed based on Ichikawa's reaction. Ichikawa finds Kafka eating on the kaiju they're supposed to clean, looking like his kaiju self. He scolds Kafka for being careless with his ugly transformation, especially since the rest of the team will arrive soon. He tells Kafka to change back to his normal self and reminds him how they fooled everyone 3 months ago by returning to the hospital after Kafka transformed, claiming they fled when the kaiju appeared in their room. Kafka sees he passed the exam but doesn't get too excited, mentioning he usually fails in the second round. Ichikawa asks if Kafka will take the second round in his kaiju form and warns that officials would kill him on the spot if he transforms during the exam. Kafka is determined to take the exam anyway, as it's his last chance. After Ichikawa leaves, Kafka expresses gratitude for passing the first round and slaps his kaiju self to transform back to normal. 10 days later, Kafka and Ichikawa arrive at Tachikawa base for the second round of tests. Kafka explains to an awestruck Ichikawa that the base shares space with a self-defense forces garrison. As they talk, other examinees arrive, and a girl calls Kafka an old man. Kafka is offended, but the girl doesn't care. She just wants him to park his car anywhere but lot 55, as 5 is her lucky number. When Kafka refuses, the girl reveals a suit under her clothes and uses her strength to move the car, surprising both Kafka and Ichikawa. She introduces herself as Examinee 2016, Hikaru Shinomiya, whose hobby is killing kaiju. She steps up to Kafka and asks if he knows he smells like a kaiju. Ichikawa steps between Kikaru and Kafka, explaining that they work in kaiju disposal. Kikaru is surprised to see disposal workers taking the Defense Force exams. Kafka adds to the surprise by lifting the company bus Kikoru had thrown earlier, making her wonder if he has a private suit like hers. Kafka introduces himself the same way Kikoru did, but his moment is overshadowed by her butler, who parks in lot 55. Kikoru mentions she thought the exam would be a formality for her, but Kafka's presence makes things interesting. She leaves with her butler, Sebasu. Ichikawa scolds Kafka for revealing his powers too soon. The two enter the building as officers ask if everything is okay. Kafka is determined to make it into the defense force this time. The second round of exams is divided into fitness and aptitude tests. Kafka and Ichikawa decide to give their best in the fitness test, unsure about their performance in the aptitude test. However, Kafka struggles to keep up, finishing 219th out of 225. Kikoru proudly shows off her 5th place finish, and Kafka begs her to forget him and his name. Ichikawa praises Kafka for not using his powers, but Kafka already regrets the decision. Ichikawa explains that this year's applicants are tough. Meanwhile, Mina receives a report about the applicants. Hoshina, the vice captain, is surprised Mina is interested but realizes it's because Kafka's profile is on the list. Ichikawa tells Kafka about Haruichi Izumo, Iharu Furuhashi, Aoi Kaguragi, and other applicants from neutralization universities and colleges. He mentions most people are focused on Kikoru, who graduated from California neutralization at 16. Kafka is shocked by Kikoru's achievements and accidentally touches her out of surprise, getting beaten by her bodyguards and mocked by other examinees. Ichikawa tries to cheer Kafka up after he shouts at Kikoru, vowing to show her up. However, Kafka recalls he may have lost his chance due to his poor fitness test performance. Ichikawa explains that the aptitude test for the past 2 years involved kaiju disposal, which is why he chose that as his part-time job. The two excitedly arrive at the second test location but are shocked when Hoshina announces they must find and neutralize kaiju. The other examinees are thrilled, except Kafka and Ichikawa. Hoshina explains they won't send the examinees into the field empty-handed. They'll wear Izumo tech gear, the GX 4552. He says the Defense Force kaiju combat suit is made from organic kaiju material and multiplies the wearer's combat power. Ichikawa is excited to see the suit integrate with his body. Okanogi, the tech specialist with Hoshina, announces the unleashed combat power percentages: Ichikawa at 8%, Izumo at 18%, Ioi at 15%, Iharu at 14%, and, to everyone's surprise, Kikoru at 46%. Hoshina notes that trainees usually draw out about 20% and thinks this year's group is doing well. Just as Hoshina thinks he'll never see anyone at 0%, Okanogi reveals Kafka is at 0%, showcasing his unique ability to fail where no one else has. Hoshina enters the room where all the examinees are gathered and informs them that their test is to eliminate 1 Hanju and 36 Yoju. He explains that these kaiju caused significant damage in Hachioji the previous year, but were captured alive for training purposes. The examinees are expected to fight them using anti-kaiju weapons. Hoshina adds that drones will monitor their actions, and if an examinee is seen in danger, their shield will activate, but this also means they've failed. Despite the risk, the examinees immediately jump into the battleground. Kikoru doesn't hold back, leaping from wall to wall and skillfully taking down kaiju, surprising both examinees and examiners. Meanwhile, Kafka drags his gun lazily behind Ichikawa, telling him not to fall behind. However, when Kafka learns that Mina is watching the assessment, he pushes through the pain of carrying the gun without his suit's unleashed power. Ichikawa and Kafka realize the defense force isn't just interested in how many kaiju they kill, but also how they adapt and assist others. Since they lack offensive abilities, they decide to support those who are fighting. Spotting Izumo and Aoi shooting at a kaiju, Kafka and Ichikawa decide to help them from the side. Ichikawa quickly recognizes the kaiju type, recalling his experience with the Ida cleaners when he worked on similar kaiju. Using his past knowledge, Kafka throws a stun grenade at the kaiju, explaining that it has weak eyesight but sharp hearing. Once its hearing is disrupted, it becomes easier to kill. He instructs Izumo to aim for the stomach, and when he does, they successfully eliminate the kaiju, earning thanks from the examinees and an intrigued look from Hoshina. Kafka feels determined to give it his all this time and runs toward the next target with Ichikawa by his side, resolved to use his kaiju knowledge. However, it seems Kafka has angered fate, as a kaiju soon appears and knocks him out of the way. The tech lady detects abnormalities in Kafka's body, and Hoshina orders her to prepare the remote shield. Just as Kafka thinks he's about to fail, Kikoru kills the Yoju and tells him no one quits when she's on the battlefield. Kafka thanks her, but Kikoru is just pleased to have outshined him again. She continues slaughtering kaiju at a pace even Izumo, Aoi, and Iharu can't match. Hoshina advises Kafka to drop out, suspecting his bones are fractured and his organs damaged, but Kafka remembers this is his last chance to stand by Mina and refuses to let her see him quit. Summoning his strength, he stands up, and to everyone's surprise, his unleashed power rises from 0% to 0.01%. Kafka decides not to give up on the exam, and Hoshina lets him be, saying he'll activate the remote shield if he notices Kafka can't hold out much longer. Kafka tells Ichikawa to go ahead since they had a deal that Ichikawa wouldn't wait for him if he failed like usual. But instead, Ichikawa carries Kafka on his back and suggests they combine their strengths, Ichikawa using his suit and Kafka using his knowledge of kaiju. Hoshina can't stop laughing at how ridiculous Ichikawa and Kafka look, to the point that even the tech lady gets annoyed. Ichikawa and Kafka hope to catch up with Kikoru and help her, but she's too fast even for Izuma, Aoi, and Iharu. Kikoru leaps from car to car, taking down the Yojis with a bullet or two, leaving nothing for her teammates. Okunogi informs the others in the operation room that Kikoru has wiped out all the Yoju in the Delta region and is now heading for the Hanju. Kikoru throws a grenade at the Hanju, catching it off guard, then jumps into its mouth and splits it open with her legs. She fires into the Hanju's mouth, taking it down, which earns a smirk from Hoshina in the operation room. Okunogi announces the defeat of the Hanju and the end of the exam, ordering the withdrawal of the drones. Hoshina is still in shock that the exam ended so quickly after all the time it took to set up. Kafka complains about how fast Kikoru is, and Ichikawa drops him, ending their combo. Mina is also impressed by Kikoru's performance, and Hoshina credits her for ensuring no one failed the exam and keeping injuries to a minimum. Kikoru looks to the sky, hoping she was perfect for her dad. As she turns, ready to mock Kafka for his constant weakness one more time, she notices movement behind her. The kaiju shoots her in the chest. Ichikawa and Kafka talk about how strong Kikoru is, and how she helped them make it to the end of the exam. Soon, they notice the kaiju they thought were dead are unexpectedly coming back to life. Kikoru pulls herself together and heals the wounds in her chest, surprising the talking kaiju. Kikoru is shocked to see the Hanju she killed revive, but she stands up, believing she can still fight. The talking kaiju shoots her multiple times. In the operation room, Okunogi hears Kikoru's screams and reports that Kikoru's vitals are showing damage. The operation room struggles to understand what's happening in the training grounds, but Okunogi explains that the Hanju Kikoru killed has regained its fortitude, now at 6.4, meaning it's alive and stronger than before. Mina orders the examinees to evacuate to a safe area while she and Hoshina head in. Kikoru refuses to evacuate, determined to be perfect. She stands up again to attack the Hanju, the talking kaiju left behind, but the Hanju smashes her aside, and she finally recognizes her own weakness. Kikoru is taken back to the time when she was at the top of the list of students accepted into Tokyo Neutralization Middle School. Unlike the many students around her, she had no one to congratulate her for her achievement, except for the butler who came to take her home. Back at home, her father doesn't celebrate with her because he believes it will only lead to failure next time. He tells Kikoru to be perfect for the sake of the nation's future and her late mother. These words motivate Kikoru to stand up again, and she picks up her gun to shoot the Hanju, declaring that she will be strong for the nation. She wants to be perfect for the nation's sake. However, this only plunges her into a state of utter pain. The Hanju grows horns as it smashes Kikoru. Hoshina and Mina enter the training grounds, and Okunogi reports to them that she has seen the Hanju with its offensive uniorgan regenerated. She also says that Kikoru is nearby, wounded. Mina and Hoshina keep running, hoping they'll make it in time. Kikoru falls to her knees, apologizing for not being perfect as the Hanju prepares for its ultimate attack. However, Kafka appears by her side and tells her she did well because she made it easier for the other examinees to escape. He transforms into a kaiju in front of her and deflects the Hanju's attack, promising to take care of it now that he's there. Kikoru can't hide her surprise at Kafka's transformation. Ichikawa is worried about Kafka while the rest of the people evacuate because he disappeared as soon as he heard Kikoru was in danger. Ichikawa decides to look for them himself, knowing that Kafka won't hesitate to transform in a situation like this, which could get him killed. Kafka pleads with Kikoru not to tell the defense force that he's a kaiju and deflects another attack from the Hanju. He excuses himself from Kikoru, saying he'll explain things later but wants to defeat the Hanju first. Okunogi reports the presence of another kaiju near the Honju to Mina and Hoshina, but they have no visual signal lucky for Kafka, who makes reckless kaiju decisions. Okunogi tells them the new kaiju has fortitude 9.8, but they choose to interpret that as a signal issue because otherwise, it would be the most powerful kaiju in history. Running out of time, Kafka decides to take out the Hanju with one punch. One punch, and the Hanju explodes into pieces all over the training grounds, its blood raining down. Kikoru watches in awe as Kafka defeats the Hanju and the Yoju that attacks from behind. Kafka tells Kikoru not to endanger herself again, and as if on cue, Ichikawa smacks Kafka on the head for disappearing and transforming in such a place. The two are distracted when Kikoru collapses. Mina and Hoshina arrive at the scene of the Hanju's corpse and are baffled by what they see. Hoshina thinks it resembles the scene from 3 years ago and wonders if the two are connected. Okunogi confirms the arrival of Ichikawa, Kafka, and Kikoru at the evacuation site, and they're relieved everyone is safe. Mina orders an investigation and disposal unit to the training grounds, while she and Hoshina take out the remaining Yojis. Kafka is in the hospital with Ichikawa, who is glad his injury isn't worse. Ichikawa tells Kafka that Kikoru is also recovering, receiving treatment with the best of the Defense Force's tech, which makes Kafka somewhat jealous. Still, he thanks Ichikawa for encouraging him to retake the exam. Mina, who has been eavesdropping on their conversation, enters the ward to thank Ichikawa and Kafka for rescuing Kikoru. Kafka avoids calling Mina by her name, waiting until he becomes an officer. Hoshina meets with Kikoru to thank her for taking down the Hanju, because she wants wants to protect Kafka, Hoshina agrees that she's the one who defeated the Hanju. The talking Hanju listens to the news in the toilet and is disappointed to hear there were 0 casualties at the training grounds. He receives a call and transforms into a human. The humanoid kaiju is a new cleaner among Ichikawa and Kafka's teammates. The wait for the results is torturing Kafka, who has finally mustered the courage to dream and hope. Ichikawa, who thought Kafka was cool at the hospital, now thinks he must have been mistaken, judging by how Kafka can't keep it together. The cleanup captain arrives with mail for Kafka and Ichikawa. Kafka hopes as he opens his letter that this time, he'll be on the path that leads him to Mina. The induction ceremony for the new members of the defense force begins. Izuma and Aoi aren't surprised to see each other, but Izuma looks a little disappointed when he doesn't spot Kafka. The arrival of Kikoru grabs everyone's attention, prompting Izuma to tell Aoi they'll have to compete for second place, though Aoi doesn't fully agree. Iharu and Ichikawa introduce themselves, and Iharu asks about Kafka, but before Ichikawa can answer, Captain Mina enters the room. Kikoru takes the oath on behalf of the 27 new recruits accepted into the force, and Mina thanks Kikoru for her bravery during the test. Kikoru doesn't say it, but she knows the person who truly saved her and defeated the kaiju during the test was Kafka. She's disappointed he isn't among them and still has questions for him. Kafka lightens the mood when he shows up, apologizing for interrupting the ceremony. During the selection process, the panel decided Kafka failed both the fitness and aptitude tests, but Hoshina says he'd like to take Kafka as a cadet in his platoon because Kafka located the kaiju's weak points during the test and prioritized helping others over increasing his kill count. Plus, Hoshina thinks Kafka is perfect for comic relief. Mina tells the inductees she advised Kafka to sit out the ceremony since he isn't a full officer, but the new recruits are thrilled that Kafka, the old dude, made the team. Hoshina asks Mina to give her speech, and she encourages the new officers to trust her despite the looming danger, as they're starting to face kaiju with stronger fortitude and the ability to reproduce or resurrect. She assures them that while some may die, she'll do her best to protect them all. Kafka, moved by her words, unintentionally declares he'll stand by Mina's side, calling her name. This earns him a punishment of 100 push-ups and laughter from Hoshina. Aside from the comedy Kafka brings, Hoshina has decided to keep him close, because when they encountered a kaiju with 9.8 fortitude during the test, Kafka's vitals also stopped transmitting. Hoshina hopes to figure out what's different about Kafka, aside from his zero-suit aptitude. The officers count with Kafka as he finishes his push-ups. Kikoru tells Kafka to come with her because they need to talk, leading the others to think Kikoru wants to confess her feelings. Kikoru kicks Kafka in the face when he resists. Ichikawa, Kafka, and Kikoru sit in a restaurant booth, and Kikoru struggles to keep her voice down when she learns Kafka turned into a kaiju after eating one. Kafka suggests telling the force about his condition, thinking they might fix him, but Kikoru advises against it. She warns that Kafka would become a specimen, and his parts might even be used to make weapons to fight kaiju. Kafka pleads with Kikoru to keep his secret, and she agrees, warning that she'll kill him the moment he becomes a kaiju that harms humans. During fire training, Ichikawa sets a new personal best, hitting targets and practicing what he's learned so far. Even Hoshina is impressed by how quickly Ichikawa has improved, especially since his unleashed power is now at 18%. Iharu finishes his training faster than Ichikawa with 20% unleashed power, feeling proud to outperform him. Aoi and Izuma also compete, both at 25%. Kikoru puts them all to shame by setting a new record time with 55% unleashed combat power. True to his underdog status, Kafka finishes last with just 1% unleashed power. Kafka, happy with his progress, tries to catch up to Kikoru but is stopped by Hoshina, who warns him that he'll never become a full officer at this rate and could be fired in 3 months. Hoshina orders everyone to wrap up with 10 laps around the grounds, but when they complain, he increases it to 15. Later, Hoshina tells Okanogi he's pleased with the healthy competition driving improvements among the new officers. Iharu and Ichikawa argue over who has bigger biceps, and Kafka tries to show off but struggles to hold his breath, revealing his large stomach. Aoi steps into the bath, silencing the three of them, while Izuma smiles. They all relax in the water together. Kikoru and some other girls enter the female changing room and meet Mina, who invites them in despite their hesitation. After Mina asks about Kikoru's health, Kikoru gathers the courage to ask Mina what exercises she did to get so strong. Mina offers to teach her the basics, and Kikoru is grateful. The guys share their reasons for joining the force, and one common thread is Captain Mina. When they ask Kafka to share his story, he reveals that Mina was his childhood friend. They press him for more details, and they end up staying in the water so long that they pass out after the session, much to Kikoru's disgust, who had just finished her own bath. The new officers bond over training, eating, climbing walls, carrying weights, meeting Mina's tiger, morning routines, and even more training. Ichikawa continues to have Kafka's back. After a long day of intense training, they end their day in the bath. Kafka pushes himself extra hard, knowing it's the only way to catch up to the others. Hoshina notices and asks if he's working so hard because of Mina, since he was talking about her in the bath. Hoshina tells Kafka he won't let him have the vice captain position and warns him not to get too close to anyone, as anything can happen at any time. Just then, an alarm sounds, waking the new officers and alerting them to the presence of a kaiju. Hoshina tells Kafka it's time for their first mission. In the operation room, Okanogi updates Mina that the evacuation started nearly 30 minutes ago. Since they're collaborating with the JSDF on this mission, a JSDF artillery regiment command post is being set up at Leon Mall parking lot. Mina asks about the Hanju, and Okanogi explains that it likely surfaced because it entered its breeding phase. Mina decides to handle the Hanju herself and selects Sector Echo as her sniper position. She instructs the other platoons to focus on neutralizing the Yojus, and the mission officially begins. Kikoru sits across from Kafka in the vehicle, still struggling to believe he's Kaiju No. He ate, but hoping he won't let her down. However, Kafka immediately disappoints by feeling nauseous from overeating due to nerves. Once on the battlefield, Hoshina briefs everyone on the mission and their roles. He explains that Mina's unit will deal with the Hanju, but the real issue is the swarm of Yojus it's producing. He notes that the neutralization zone is intentionally kept clear of critical infrastructure and transportation routes, and the officers' defense efforts will determine the city's damage and recovery time. Recruits are stationed at the rear, serving as the last line of defense. When no one asks questions, Okanogi announces that Mina has 8 minutes until she reaches her position. Kafka and Ichikawa exchange words of encouragement. Ichikawa is relieved to hear Kafka feels both pressured and excited. Eager to begin, Kafka urges Kikoru to hurry as a Yoju appears in Sector Echo. The officers leap down walls, but Kafka, still unable to fully unleash his power, climbs down carefully to avoid injury. The JSDF lures the Hanju to Sector Bravo with a series of fire shots to assist Mina, who has now reached her spot. Hoshina hopes the new recruits will prove their strength to their superiors during this mission. Kafka feels oddly calm and stands on the front line as they face the Yojus, but one easily kicks him away since he's only using 1% of his power. Kikoru tells Kafka to stay in the rear, and the superiors wonder why they're stuck babysitting new recruits. Kikoru quickly shows the superiors who really needs babysitting by accurately shooting a Yoju without knowing its weak points. Kafka praises her skills, causing her heart rate to spike, but she brushes it off and keeps firing. Iharu, Ichikawa, Izuma, and Aoi also hold their own. Iharu takes down a Yoju after several shots, but when he turns to brag to Ichikawa, he's shocked to see Ichikawa neutralized one with a single shot. Ichikawa explains he used freeze-round bullets, which suit his style better. Ichikawa is giving his all because he doesn't want his senpai, Kafka, to transform to defeat the Kaijus. Izuma shoots down a pole to slow a speedy Yoju, and Aoi takes out 6 Yojus with Izuma's help. The senior officers suddenly lose confidence, and their platoon leader, Nakanoshima, informs them that Hoshina said the new recruits are stronger than those from previous years. Not only that, but their frontline performance motivates the others to do better. However, Nakanoshima is more impressed by the new recruits' looks. Kafka listens to Okanogi's reports and notices that even Ichikawa is putting in his best effort during the battle. Feeling a bit down about slowing things down, Kafka wonders how he can be useful to the hunting officers. He then remembers that the weak points of the Yoju haven't been discovered yet. Drawing on his knowledge of dissecting Kaiju, Kafka gets to work on a Yoju corpse and discovers that the core of the Kaiju is located at the base of its neck. He also finds out that the Yoju have reproductive organs that allow them to spawn new Yoju even after death, unless those organs are destroyed. He shares this info with Hoshina, who's observing from a high vantage point. Hoshina praises Kafka for the valuable intel, and Okanogi relays this information to everyone on the battlefield. Kafka rushes out to neutralize the Yoju corpses, feeling good about being able to help the defense force. An explosion interrupts him, but he realizes it's just part of the preparations for Mina's attack on the Hanju. The JSDF officers pin the Hanju in place by shooting its legs, and Mina signals her readiness to Okanogi, who gives her the green light to fire. Mina charges her gun with 96% of her power, cracking the ground beneath her foot as she prepares to shoot. Hoshina tells Kafka to pay close attention as Mina fires her first shot, which goes straight through the Hanju. Mina fires a second shot, and the Hanju's vitals vanish, causing it to collapse. With Okanogi's permission, Mina fires a third shot, and Okanogi confirms that the Hanju has taken critical damage, losing all ability to move or fight. So, it's a surprise when Mina announces she's loaded her gun for a fourth shot. She thanks the fourth shot, leaving Kafka intrigued. Hoshina asks Kafka if he feels like giving up, pointing out that to stand by Mina's side, he'd need to match her strength. Hoshina admits he doesn't have that kind of power when it comes to big kaiju, but can handle smaller ones faster than Mina. He proves this when a Yoju appears behind him mid-conversation, and he dispatches it with a katana faster than Kafka can see. Hoshina explains that the captain and vice captain are the strongest in the force, which is why they have weapons customized to their fighting styles. Mina tells Hoshina that the Hanju is down, but they both know the real fight is just beginning because all the Yoju inside the Hanju will start pouring out of its corpse. The swarm of Yoju energizes the senior officers, and Nakanoshima encourages the new recruits to keep fighting. Okanogi is worried about the rookies, but everyone knows there's no stopping them. Hoshina Hoshina hopes this mission will help the new recruits level up, especially Kikoru and Ichikawa, who he has high hopes for. Ichikawa takes out the last Yoju in his sector, and Iharu struggles to hide his jealousy. Ichikawa suggests they both head back to the front lines, but after running for a bit, they encounter a kaiju cleaner complaining about someone removing the reproductive organs he planted in the Yoju. He turns to Ichikawa and Iharu and asks if they know anything about it. The captain of the cleaners is searching for the new guy, while the others watch the Hanju scene through binoculars, commenting that they now understand why nearly every cleaner in Tokyo was called out. They assume the new guy must have locked himself in a bathroom like usual, and no one is worried. The cleaner that Ichikawa and Iharu ran into points at Iharu, saying he'll take a sample of the defense force home, even if he can't finish his mission. Something strikes Iharu near his chest, and the cleaner transforms into a kaiju. Ichikawa and Iharu recognize it as the kaiju that appeared during their test. Ichikawa tries to contact platoon leader Ikarugi to report the humanoid kaiju, but when he gets no response, the kaiju explains that the area is completely undetectable from the outside world. It's a trap he set to stay hidden from humans and is also ideal for hunting them. The kaiju attacks Ichikawa's arm and leg, and Ichikawa is shocked that the attacks penetrate his combat suit. He remembers Kikoru's words about the kaiju seeming to use magic, but in reality, it prepares for every attack, and its strikes can be dodged. Ichikawa successfully dodges the next one, surprising Iharu. Ichikawa tells Iharu to run and call for backup, but Iharu wonders why he should let Ichikawa protect him. Ichikawa doesn't need to explain as the kaiju points at Iharu again, and Ichikawa jumps in to shield him, though Iharu's left arm takes the brunt of the attack. Ichikawa begs Iharu to leave and report the kaiju. Seeing no other option, Iharu stands up and runs like a scared coward. Ichikawa knows he doesn't stand a chance against the kaiju Aven. Kikoru couldn't handle it, but he wants to buy as much time as possible for Iharu to get help. Iharu struggles to understand what's changed in Ichikawa since the previous day. He trips while running and nearly falls, forcing him to stop. He wonders why he always needs someone to save him, like Mina did when he was younger. He doesn't know how to get stronger and recalls Hoshina, saying it's hard to increase unleashed power from 20 to 30%. Iharu's been stuck at 20% for 2 weeks, while Ichikawa surpassed him effortlessly. He stands up and mutters that he hates it all. Ichikawa keeps shooting at the kaiju until it vanishes and reappears beside him. The kaiju is impressed that Ichikawa knows a bit about him, but reveals Ichikawa's limited understanding by opening more pores for his attack. Ichikawa is stunned, but Iharu, realizing he doesn't hate Ichikawa but himself for not improving since day one, jumps in to save Ichikawa just in time. The kaiju tells them no one can leave his trap without his permission, meaning Iharu can't get help even if he tries. Iharu vows to fight beside Ichikawa with what little strength he has. Ichikawa takes the lead in the fight, and Iharu gets a chance to use a conductor round, making it hard for the kaiju to move. When the kaiju attacks Iharu this time, he dodges it. Iharu fires another conduction bullet, creating an opening for Ichikawa, who unleashes his maximum combat power against the kaiju. But when he finishes shooting, he realizes the kaiju has built a wall of Yoju corpses to protect itself. The kaiju emerges unscathed from the wall of corpses and shoots Ichikawa multiple times, much to Iharu's dismay. Ikaruga informs Hoshina that they've lost communication and vital signals from Iharu and Ichikawa. Kikoru finds Kafka and tells him that the kaiju from their exam is there. Iharu tries to stop the kaiju from harming Ichikawa, who's already badly wounded and can't move as easily as before, but Iharu ends up taking an attack himself. Ichikawa struggles to move or heal his injuries, and the kaiju hits him again. Iharu gathers his strength to pick up his gun and protect Ichikawa, believing that Ichikawa could one day become a captain, but when he pulls the trigger, he realizes his gun is empty. The kaiju decides to finish off Iharu first, since he's no longer useful, and Iharu prays desperately for someone to save Ichikawa. Luckily, Kafka arrives in his kaiju form. Kafka punches the kaiju so hard that its head separates from its body, leaving Iharu shocked to see another humanoid kaiju. Kafka carries Ichikawa to safety and tells him to use his combat suit to close his wounds, cracking a joke like a broke comedian. Ichikawa worries that he's so weak, Kafka had to transform again, and tells Kafka to be careful. Kafka reassures Ichikawa that he'll handle the kaiju, but Ichikawa has a bad feeling. The kaiju shoots Kafka through his kaiju form, and Ichikawa yells at Kafka to run when he sees the kaiju opening its pores again, aiming to kill him. Iharu is stunned to realize the kaiju wasn't taking their fight seriously. Kafka eases Ichikawa's fears by punching the kaiju so hard it tries to retreat into the wall of corpses. Kafka doesn't let up, relentlessly attacking the kaiju until he exposes its core with a blow to its torso. Kikoru worries about Kafka because she transformed in front of him and doesn't know how far he's gone. Kafka's defeat of the kaiju breaks the trap it created, and using the officers as a distraction, the kaiju disappears. Kafka realizes he needs to escape and leaps away, but Hoshina catches up to him. Hoshina announces he's made contact with Kaiju number 8 and requests his limiter be removed, proving he wasn't bluffing about being better with smaller killer kaiju. Ichikawa and Kikoru grow concerned for Kafka now that Hoshina has confronted him. Hoshina unleashes his combat power at 92%, vowing to neutralize Kaiju number 8. Kafka wonders how to fight Hoshina, since he can't rely on his overpowered fists against the vice captain. Hoshina, however, doesn't waste any time and slashes through Kafka with his katana, pleased that his method worked. Kafka dodges Hoshina's attacks, but realizes that because Hoshina is so fast with his weapon, swinging from left to right, Kafka can't harden his body quickly enough to block. Kafka is fascinated by Hoshina's movements and attacks. He knows that if he's not careful, even in his humanoid form, he won't be able to keep up with Hoshina's speed. Hoshina scales walls and relentlessly wields his weapons until he locates Kafka's core. Kafka regenerates, but acknowledges that he can't keep doing it because it drains his stamina. Hoshina, however, doesn't care and charges at Kafka again. With a moment to prepare for the next attack, Hoshina feels a strange sensation during the fight, but brushes it off. He launches an invisible attack and then rushes at Kafka, who realizes the double attack was a decoy. Hoshina had planned a triple attack. Thanks to Kafka's quick thinking, he blocks the third strike aimed at his core and pushes the blade away, using the chance to escape. Hoshina is disappointed that Kaiju No 8 got away but files his report anyway. Kikoru worries if she can trust Kafka, who is Kaiju number 8, and as if on cue, he appears before her. Kikoru is excited to see Kafka but pretends she wasn't worried. The loser human but hero Kaiju says he wants to check on Ichikawa and Iharu, but Kikoru stops him, explaining they'll be fine since the defense force now uses Kaiju regeneration in their tech. She tells Kafka to worry about himself because after encountering Hoshina, they might find clues leading to him. Mina catches Hoshina in an awkward state and asks about Kaiju number 8. Hoshina suspects the Kaiju might be a Daikaiju, and Mina notes that would be the first since Fukuoka 5 years ago. Hoshina points out that there have been no human casualties since Kaiju number 8 appeared, and speculates that the strange feeling he had during the fight was because the Kaiju didn't attack him directly. He also felt like he was fighting a human rather than a Kaiju. Mina tells Hoshina not to worry, their job is to neutralize the Kaiju, no matter what type it is. She tells him to rest while she takes over. However, Ikaruga's report comes in, revealing that the Kaiju that attacked Ichikawa and Iharu first appeared in human form. The Kaiju is named Kaiju No 9, and on his way, he attacks a human and steals a car to escape. Ichikawa wakes up in the hospital and thanks Kafka for saving him and Iharu, but Kafka and Kikoru just stare in shock. Ichikawa realizes Iharu is in the same room, and Iharu asks why Ichikawa is thanking Kafka when Kaiju number 8 saved them. Kikoru explains that Kafka identified the Kaiju's neutralization points, and Iharu accepts this, praising Kaiju number 8 for being so cool. This makes the foolish old dude blush, but Kikoru punches him, saying he looks as dumb as ever. After Ichikawa and Iharu leave the hospital, a party is thrown to celebrate them and the successful completion of their first mission. The officers are treated to a course of A6 grade marbled Japanese black Wagyu beef, courtesy of Izumo, who's the son of Izumo Technologies, the company that manufactures the Defense Force's combat suits. Hoshina congratulates everyone on finishing their first mission and encourages them to enjoy themselves. Ichikawa is thrilled to see everyone in high spirits and thanks Hoshina for organizing the party. However, Hoshina warns him not to get too comfortable, as things are just starting to get interesting. Sure enough, the atmosphere in the room shifts as the officers begin debating each other's weaknesses, arguing over who outperformed whom, and discussing who hindered or helped during the mission. Ichikawa is surprised to see even Kafka joining in the arguments. Everywhere he looks, the officers are dissecting the mission, and Hoshina remarks that everyone has identified their shortcomings and will keep talking about the mission because they're all determined to improve. Okonogi and Hoshina are amused as this post-mission argument is an annual tradition. Outside the restaurant, Dojima, the chef, chats with Izumo and asks about his father. Izumo admits he hasn't spoken to his dad since then. Aoi walks by just in time but pretends not to overhear and heads to the bathroom. Izumo thanks Dojima for the incredible meal. Back inside, Hoshina interrupts the argument to make an announcement. He calls Kafka's name and declares that Kafka has been promoted to full officer for saving numerous lives during the mission. Everyone, including Aoi and Izumo, is happy about Kafka's promotion. Kafka takes his oath in Mina's office, and she cautions him not to get too excited, as he still has a long way to go before he can fight alongside her. Kafka's enthusiasm leads him to address Mina by her name again, breaking their promise, so she punishes him with 50 push-ups. Mina informs Kafka that Hoshina recommended him for the officer position and hopes he lives up to Hoshina's expectations. She also mentions that she needs to present the reports on Kaiju number 8 and number 9 at HQ. After another late-night study session, Kafka decides to get some rest before Hoshina catches him and gives another lecture. As he steps out, he notices the lights in the training room are still on and finds Hoshina practicing mental imagery, reenacting his fight with Kaiju number 8. Hoshina's movements are sharp and almost inhuman, leaving Kafka stunned. Hoshina notices Kafka and explains that he's strategizing to defeat number 8 in one go the next time they meet. Kafka gets nervous, and Hoshina admits he's training because he knows the officers can't handle number 9 and number 8 alone, so he'll have to take them down himself. Kafka promises to be useful in the battle, and Hoshina says he'll give Kafka 1% of his expectations before heading back to the office. Unbeknownst to them, a group of kaiju led by a master is about to descend from the sky. Hoshina is reading reports about kaiju number 8, who he still thinks fights like a human. He's baffled that number 9 can disguise itself and speak like a human too. He wonders what's going on with the kaiju. Outside, Kafka finishes his canned drink and decides he won't let Hoshina down since he now has 1% of his expectations. He tosses the can and heads back inside to sleep, but is stopped by the sound of chaos descending. Kafka watches fire engulf different parts of the Tachikawa base from the sky. Even the new recruits wake up, confused about what's happening. Hoshina asks for a report from the operations room, and Okanogi says there are dozens of kaiju in the base with fortitude levels ranging from 6.1, 6.3, 6.2 to 6.5 all Hanju class. Hoshina announces he'll take command since Mina isn't on base. He tells the officers on duty to man their battle stations and requests that off-duty officers be called in. Since there's no report of damage outside the base, Hoshina wonders if the kaiju are targeting the base itself. Kafka is still trying to figure out what's going on, because seeing wyvern-type kaiju attacking in a group means something's off. Hoshina orders those with rifles to gather at the base's center, lure the kaiju there, and take them down. Kafka calls Hoshina, and they agree the only reason the kaiju are attacking in a group is because they have an intelligent leader. Hoshina ends the call the moment they encounter this leader kaiju, and Okanogi reports its fortitude is 8.3, a Daikaiju class. The kaiju asks Hoshina if he's the strongest in the base, and Hoshina confirms he is since the captain isn't around. Hoshina tells Ikaruga to take command of defeating the Yoju while he handles the Hanju. The kaiju attacks Hoshina, but he dodges, and the kaiju gets excited to start Hoshina's annihilation, declaring him its prey. The kaiju screams into the sky, and the surrounding Yoju respond, confirming the group is targeting the base. The kaiju tries to punch Hoshina, and he barely escapes, realizing one hit could kill him. Hoshina takes the battle seriously, jumping at the kaiju while dodging its punches. However, his katana barely scratches the kaiju, showing its skin is tougher than kaiju number 8's. Ikaruga orders his men to retreat and switch to oscillator round bullets, since they can't take down the Yoju from the front. Kafka, who had run away like a coward, returns and tells the officers to aim for the Yoju's back, explaining that while the front is easier to attack in flight, the back has thinner skin and houses their core. Grateful for the lazy man's useful info, Ikaruga tells the officers to work together to take down the Yoju. Ioi and Izumo team up, with Ioi distracting the Yoju from the front, while Izumo attacks from the back. Aoi shoots the Yoju's leg to keep its attention, and Izumo prepares to unleash full power on its back. But just as he's about to pull the trigger, another Yoju shows up to save its ally. The group is shocked the Yoju are cooperating. Everyone reports the same issue. They can't reach the Yoju's back because another Yoju always intervenes. Amid the chaos, Kikaru steps in and says there's another way. She dashes past the group with lightning speed and strikes through the front armor of the Yoju with her custom-made weapon, leaving everyone stunned. A few days earlier, Mina and Hoshina made an exception for Kikoru and gave her a custom-made weapon, since she's the third strongest officer at the base. This weapon allows Kikoru to take down Yojus that other officers struggle with, as it can cut straight through their thick skin. Her weapon was crafted using the uni-organ of a Hanju that was neutralized in Shinagawa 2 years prior. Kikoru generates a shockwave with her weapon and slashes a Yoju using the number 1 squadron technique, Falling Thunder. She moves to another Yoju and unleashes a frontal shockwave on impact with the number 2 technique, Water Skimmer. Iharu and Ichikawa are impressed just watching her, and Ichikawa remarks that the weapon suits Kikoru perfectly. A Yoju attacks from above, but Ichikawa takes it down with freeze rounds, impressing Kikoru in return. Kikoru finishes off the Yoju with her third technique, Half Moon. She decides to team up with Ichikawa to handle the Yojus, while Aoi and Izumo agree to attack from behind once the initial duo distracts them. Hoshina is relieved that Kikoru has managed to control the Yojus, but he's concerned about the kaiju he's fighting, as he can sense its strength. He also notices the kaiju seems to be enjoying the fight and emotion kaijus aren't supposed to feel. Hoshina flies backward, luring the kaiju into the training ground, but he's disappointed when the kaiju destroys the expensive gates. The kaiju admits it's impressed by Hoshina's fighting style, as most kaijus can't match him. It eagerly declares it can't wait to eat Hoshina and grow stronger. The kaiju throws a devastating punch that even scares Okanogi in the operations room, but Hoshina apologizes for breaking protocol, knowing he can't harm anyone in the training ground, and unleashes his full power. He's already slashed the kaiju's arm and is ready to neutralize it. To save Mines, one of the officers, Kafka has no choice but to transform his legs. He's relieved when she assumes he's finally learned to use his combat suit. Hikaru saves both Minaz and Kafka from a Yoju attack, back, and Ichikawa encourages Kafka to trust the team instead of taking unnecessary risks. Kikoru tells Minaze and Kafka to help the wounded while they handle the Yojus. Minaze and Kafka watch their friends fight, impressed by their skill. Okanogi announces that Nakanoshima and Ibina's units have arrived to support the battle. Kafka is relieved they've started to take control, even with the captain absent, and tells Minaze they should quickly assist the wounded. Hoshina tells the kaiju they picked a fight with the wrong people and begins slicing through the tiny gaps in the kaiju's exoskeleton, dealing more damage than the kaiju expected. The kaiju finds the battle less fun now, thinking it can predict Hoshina's moves, but it's completely wrong. Hoshina uses his sword techniques Cross Slasher and Wild Slasher to attack the kaiju, but the kaiju regenerates quickly, excited the fight is no longer easy. The kaiju says it enjoys a battle between equals, as they move at nearly the same speed, but Hoshina uses this to expose the kaiju's core. Hoshina lands a decisive hit with his 8-fold slasher, and the operations room erupts in celebration. However, the celebration is short-lived as the kaiju regenerates and grows even larger. Kafka's detection abilities activate without him transforming. The kaiju releases steam within the training grounds, and Okanogi announces it has a fortitude level of 9. The kaiju roars into the sky. Everyone in the operation room knows Hoshina isn't at his best when dealing with kaijus of this size. As he once told Kafka, he's only skilled at handling smaller kaijus. Kafka, struggling to stay still next to Minase due to his kaiju detection abilities and the vice captain's peril, takes off, unsure what else to do. The kaiju throws a punch that smashes into the ground, but Hoshina dodges it, leaping onto the kaiju's body with his katana ready. He uses his third fighting style, Return Slasher, cutting near the kaiju's neck, then jumps to a nearby building before slashing its thighs. The kaiju roars, digs into the ground, and throws another punch, taunting Hoshina that his speed won't save him. Hoshina, seemingly unfazed, keeps jumping between buildings, slashing the kaiju at every opportunity. Okanogi is shocked that Hoshina hasn't stopped fighting despite the kaiju's unexpected transformation, but Hoshina is running out of time. Even though he hates giant kaijus and plans to use his speed to reach the kaiju's core, his suit is nearing its operational limits. Hoshina decides to make the most of his remaining minute, despite Okanogi advising him to shut down his unleashed power. Before he can act, the kaiju sends self-destructing Yojus toward him. Hoshina uses the moment to retreat into a building and strategize. He leaps out, ready to attack with his 6th fighting style, but the kaiju has more eyes than he anticipated, and it punches him into a wall. His suit deactivates its maximum release, and Okanogi screams his name, fearing he's dead. There's no response, and their worry spikes until Hoshina, remembering his father's advice to give up, smiles and says he's not dead. He stands, now concerned without his maximum release. At Hoshina's request, Okanogi updates him. Civilians outside are nearly evacuated, and officers have control of the Yojus in the base. Hoshina resolves to keep fighting, but Okanogi isn't convinced. Unlike Kafka, who gives up easily, Hoshina won't be deterred. He leaps at the kaiju, using his first fighting style to slash it, but as the kaiju regenerates, something clicks in its head. Hoshina realizes he can't defeat it with his katana something he's known all along. His father, his first boss, and others have told Hoshina to give up because he doesn't wield guns for high combat power. The kaiju's taunts don't faze him. When he decided to work with Mina, she didn't tell him to quit. She told him to work with her for the same reason others wanted him to give up, because he's a blade specialist. Hoshina is ready to fight the kaiju because Mina asked him to clear a path for her, and at this critical moment, she left him in charge of the base. It's his duty to protect the base and everyone from harm, even if it costs him his life. He climbs onto the kaiju and starts using his slashing techniques, starting with style number 1. After dealing some damage, he jumps off and returns with another style, inflicting as many injuries as possible. But just as he's about to use style number 6, the kaiju grabs him and squeezes him in its hand. Kafka, who's now in the training ground, screams at the sight. Hoshina coughs up blood from the pain, and Kafka can't hold back the urge to transform into his kaiju form anymore, even though Ichikawa warns him against it. The loser thinks he's being clever by prioritizing his comrades' lives, but Mina beats him to it with her arrival. Kafka pauses, and Hoshina tells the kaiju it's won the fight right before Mina's bullet hits it, causing the kaiju to drop Hoshina. Mina apologizes to Okanogi for skipping protocols, but it's an emergency, and she doesn't hesitate to shoot the kaiju, which now has its eye on her. The shot wounds the kaiju's arm, making it cry out and collapse part of the building where Mina is, forcing her to move. The kaiju uses this chance to regenerate. Okanogi quickly tells Mina, now repositioned with her tiger by her side, that the kaiju's core is around the 4th to 6th thoracic vertebrae, as seen on the monitor in the operation room. Hoshina realizes the kaiju isn't an easy target and unleashes 63% of his combat power. Okanogi thinks Hoshina's crazy as he repeatedly slashes the kaiju's legs to hinder its mobility, even though his suit has already exceeded its limits. Hoshina's efforts aren't very effective because the kaiju regenerates as fast as it's wounded. Wondering what he can do with his limited strength, Kikoru suddenly arrives to help with her massive axe. But instead of wounding the kaiju, the strength of its skin throws her and her weapon back. Kikoru is disappointed she couldn't even scratch the kaiju, but Hoshina tells her to wait until he cuts through its hard shell. Hoshina gets up and successfully slashes the kaiju's leg. Kikoru doesn't waste time, swinging her axe into the open wound and cutting off the kaiju's leg, causing it immense pain and leaving it helpless for a while. Kikoru's suit also reaches its limit, and Hoshina smiles, acknowledging she's done her best. Mina takes the opportunity to shoot the kaiju again, this time exposing its core. As Mina loads her last bullet for another attack, some Yojis try to attack her, but they're killed by the arrival of other officers. Nakanoshima and Ibina apologize to Mina for being late to the training ground. With their units, following Hoshina's instructions, they stop the Yojus and attack the kaiju, giving it no time to regenerate. Hoshina takes on the job of distracting the kaiju by slashing it in various spots from the arm to the thighs and legs. The kaiju smashes buildings in response to the pain it feels. Kafka also uses his measly 1% power to shoot at every opportunity. Determined to make an impact in this battle, Hoshina keeps slicing away, pushing himself to move within the 5 seconds he has left. When the kaiju opens its mouth and stomps its legs, trying to swallow Hoshina, Mina thanks him for his help and for being her vice captain. She then unleashes her full combat power of 96%, grabs her gun, and without hesitation, takes the final shot. Hoshina falls to the ground, smirking at the foolish kaiju for picking a fight with the wrong people. The kaiju cries out as the bullet hits, scattering into pieces across the training ground. The base is filled with palpable relief until Okanogi announces that the kaiju is down. Everyone in the operation room sighs in joy. Izumo and Aoi bump fists, grateful they survived the battle, while Iharu screams triumphantly into the sky. Mina leaves her spot with her gun and her tiger, and the officers start tending to the wounded. Hoshina walks over to Kikoru and helps her up. When Mina joins them, they salute each other in recognition of their hard-earned victory. This scene brings Kafka to tears, and he says he was right to dream of joining the defense force as a kid, because he wants to stand beside those three someday. Ichikawa tells Kafka his face is a mess, and Kafka frowns, asking why he had to ruin such an emotional moment. Ichikawa reminds him that to get there, they need to give their all, not cry like babies. Hoshina tells Kikoru that he and the captain will handle the remaining Yojis, but Mina cuts him off, smacking him on the head and telling him to rest. Nakanoshima also stops Mina from getting involved in the cleanup, saying she needs rest too since her suit is down to 1% and overheating. Ibina says they'll take care of the Yojis, but Mina ignores him. Mina's tiger seems to sense something wrong, growling as it looks up at the sky while Kafka laughs awkwardly like a comedian whose jokes aren't landing. Soon, everyone looks up and realizes the battle is far from over. A Yoju enters a massive ball formed from the bodies of countless Yojis in the sky, and Hoshina realizes the kaiju's final cry before its defeat wasn't one of death. Okanogi explains that the energy level of the ball in the sky is rising, indicating an ultra-massive Yoju bomb with an estimated blast impact equal to 20 kilotons of TNT is about to hit them. The kaiju, in its helpless state, tells Hoshina the battle is a draw. Kafka, ever foolish and never learning, runs off toward the impending nuclear bomb. Hoshina chases after him, yelling for him to come back since there's nothing he can do, but seeing he can't catch up, Hoshina wonders how Kafka's 1% allows him to run so fast. Okanogi confirms the presence of another kaiju in the base, with a fortitude level of 9.8, belonging to Kaiju number 8. It's then that everyone realizes Kafka is Kaiju number 8. Hoshina is disappointed in himself for liking Kafka so much without knowing his true identity. In his mind, Kafka apologizes to Hoshina and everyone for lying to them. He's sorry for Kikoru and Ichikawa, who kept his secret, and for Mina, whom he can't rejoin because of his revelation. Kafka thinks everyone fought so hard in this battle, and he can't be the only one prioritizing his safety. He opens parts of his legs and, like a rocket, launches into the sky. Remembering he's an officer in the Defense Force in Division 3, Kafka pushes the nuclear bomb high into the sky to minimize its impact on the city. When Kafka lands back at the base, Mina orders everyone to stay down with their shields at max. The nuclear bomb detonates, but Kafka protects everyone in the base with his kaiju powers. However, the training grounds are heavily destroyed. Once the dust settles, Mina and the other officers point their guns at Kafka and arrest him. In the operation room, the operators inform Keiji that Kaiju number 8 is stable and shows no signs of transforming. Kafka, restrained and isolated, is monitored from the operation room. He wonders what will happen to him now that he's been caught, recalling Kikoru's warning that powerful numbered kaiju are killed and turned into weapons. Kafka feels disappointed, having just taken a step closer to his goals, and wonders how angry Mina is. As if reading his mind, Mina enters the isolation room with other officers and the vice captain, announcing it's time to take Kafka to HQ. Kafka holds back from calling out to Mina, and when he tries to speak to Hoshina, Hoshina tells him to stay silent. Hoshina orders Kafka to stand as his restraints are released, and they all silently leave the facility. Kafka realizes they're not talking to him because he kept a huge secret. The entire 3rd Division is lined up outside as Kafka and the others exit the facility. Nakanoshima informs Mina that the security detail is ready to escort Kafka to HQ. As Kafka walks past them, he's filled with self-disappointment and can't bring lowering himself to look at Ichikawa, who had done so much for him. Kafka steps into the waiting van, feeling like it's all over, until Ichikawa breaks formation and shouts that he believes Kafka will come back to them. Inside the van, Mina tells Kafka that Ichikawa will be punished for speaking out of turn. She also mentions there are no cameras in the van, allowing her to speak freely. Mina admits she was surprised to see Kafka as a kaiju when he saved them, but knew it was in his nature to protect everyone. She explains they're writing reports to prove Kafka is human in hopes of saving him, along with documenting his contributions as an officer. After this, she tells him to sit down. Mina reads the arrest order to send Kafka to the Ariake Maritime base, but Kafka asks if he still has a chance to fight alongside her. Mina says yes, adding she'll keep waiting for him, which makes Kafka cry like a hopeless loser. As the van leaves the base, Hoshina acknowledges that Kafka is an idiot but still orders the entire division to salute. Keiji questions what Hoshina is doing, and Hoshina replies that he's saluting their captain, Mina. Keiji warns that it better be for Mina because no one is supposed to salute a kaiju. Back at the maritime base, bulkheads 23 to 21 are sealed, and Kafka is confined to another isolation room, strapped to a seat. A few days later, Aoi, Izumo, Ichikawa, Iharu, and Minaze are feeling down at the base. Iharu tries to lighten the mood with a joke about Kafka, but it doesn't even get a smile. Minaze reminds everyone that Kafka saved her life, identified the kaiju's weak points, and made training enjoyable. Iharu agrees that Kafka saved his life too. Aoi points out that they have no control over the situation, only the Neutralization Bureau does. Izumo explains that the situation is dangerous because a human transforming into a kaiju means that if the public finds out, everyone will live in fear, wondering who's human and who's a kaiju. It's too much for them to handle. Okanogi enters Mina's office, and Mina asks her to compile files about Kafka. Mina checks if Okanogi can complete the task, and she agrees. Ebina reports to Hoshina that they've cleared all the destroyed cars, and Hoshina thanks him. Ebina asks if Hoshina is worried about Kafka's fate, but instead of answering, Hoshina climbs down from the rubble he's standing on. As they walk away, Hoshina tells Ebina that he needs Kafka back because during their fight, Kafka wasn't using his full strength. Hoshina wants another battle with him, and Ebina agrees. Hikaru hesitates outside her dad's office before gathering the courage to enter. She starts to call Aizo daddy, but stops herself, addressing him as Director General Shinomiya with a salute. She requests that Kafka not be eliminated, as he once saved her life. Her dad calls her a fool for bringing up her failures and shows her a document. When Kikoru opens the envelope, she finds an X-ray inside. Isao points out what looks like a heart on the left side of Kafka's chest, but explains it's actually his kaiju core. He tells Kikoru that Kafka isn't human. He's no different from the kaiju that killed her mother and orders her to leave if she understands. Kikoru turns to leave, but stops to tell Isao that she wants to believe in Kafka. Some scientists enter Kafka's room, and he asks if they're going to perform another physical exam. He tries to joke, but they don't laugh or respond. Still, Kafka isn't ready to give up, especially after what Ichikawa and Mina told him last time. Mina informs Ichikawa, Aoi, Iharu, and Izumo that they're being transferred to other divisions to complete their officer training. Tachikawa base is only at 75% functionality after the last attack and isn't considered a proper training ground anymore. She explains that the higher-ups are concerned they've faced too many high-class kaiju and might encounter more soon. They need to be ready, and the boys are key to that. Mina adds that the most talented recruits from each division will train at division borders, and Iharu is thrilled to be called talented. Izumo seems to believe that this separation is a tactic to split up everyone close to Kafka and monitor them, but Mina dismisses that idea by explaining that the plan has been in motion for a long time. Izumo says he doesn't want to switch divisions regardless, and Iharu feels the same because he likes Mina. However, Ichikawa is willing to make the change, and even when Iharu tries to warn him about the separation, Ichikawa stays firm in his decision. Outside the base, Izumo checks his call log while Aoi walks by, talking on the phone and pleading for someone to be saved. After ending the call with a bow, Aoi turns to leave but notices Izumo nearby. They both apologize for intruding on each other's space, and Aoi starts to walk away, but Izumo calls him back. Aoi sits down beside Izumo and explains that he was speaking to his former commander in the JSDF. Izumo is surprised that Aoi is pulling strings to help Kafka, and Aoi reminds Izumo that he once said he didn't want to lose anyone in Division 3 and that includes Kafka. In his isolation, Kafka decides that all he needs to do is prove he's human. Just like Mina said, he resolves to speak to them and make them listen. Just then, Isao enters the room with some officers. Kafka wonders if Isao will hear him out, so he shouts that he's human, not a kaiju. But Isao orders the operation room to release the bindings holding Kafka. The operator warns that this could be dangerous since Kafka is Kaiju No 8, but Isao points out that if Kafka is truly a Daikaiju class, he's sitting there because he wants to, not because he can't break free. Once Kafka steps out of the chair, Isao doesn't listen to him and instead shoots him multiple times, alarming Kikoru, who's watching with Keiji Keiji and Juzo from the operation room. Kafka stops the bullets with his transformed hands, but Isao dips his hand into Kafka's kaiju body to draw blood into a test tube. Isao tells Kafka that anyone who can stop bullets with their bare hands in their world can't be considered human, they're a kaiju. He addresses Kafka as Kaiju No 8, but Kafka refuses to accept that identity, insisting he's Hibino Kafka, not Kaiju number 8. Isao raises his hands, and those in the operation room take it as a signal to activate FS-1002. The officers with Isao open the suitcase they brought, and Isao equips the hands inside. The activation of FS-1002, made from Kaiju number 2, is complete, and Isao declares he's ready to dispose of Kaiju number 8 entirely. Kafka decides he won't fully transform but will prove he's human. However, Isao's first blow in the suit sends Kafka flying across the room. The moment Kafka stands up, Isao shoots him with a bullet from his hand, and Juzo is relieved to see that their director, once known as the strongest man in the force, still has that power. Kikoru is worried about Kafka, who has foolishly transformed only half of his face after his stubborn decision not to fully transform. Isao comments that Kafka looks more like his true self. Kafka decides to keep dodging Isao until his suit overheats. However, Isao has no intention of giving Kafka any chance. He charges at him like a mad dog, delivering blows to Kafka's head, stomach, chest, back, and every possible part of his body. After a few seconds, Kafka wonders why fighting Izo feels like battling a daikaiju. In the operating room, Keiji explains to Kikoru that the suit her father is using was made from Kaiju No 2, the second kaiju to be numbered, which nearly destroyed Sapporo in 1972. Isao is the only one who has been able to wear the suit crafted from that kaiju. Kafka finally understands what Kikoru meant when she said the suits were made from numbered kaiju. Isao relentlessly punches Kafka from left to right, leaving him no room to breathe. Isao lands a punch in Kafka's stomach, and just as Kafka decides he shouldn't let Isao's punches hit him again, he realizes he can't move because all his limbs have been severed. Isao delivers another punch in this helpless state, terrifying Kikoru, and Kafka fully transforms to dodge the blow. Isao is pleased to see Kafka in his kaiju form, but Kikoru senses something is wrong. Kafka's face begins to crack, and Kaiju No 8 lets out a scream, shattering the glass in the operating room and confirming Kikoru's fears. Inside the kaiju, Kafka can't understand why he's lost control of his body. Kaiju No 8 morphs into a monstrous form on the outside. The kaiju cells within Kafka command him to kill, and Kaiju No 8 charges at an incredible speed, prompting Kikoru to shout at the kaiju that he's still human. Before the showdown at headquarters, Ichikawa is pushing himself hard in the gym, leaving Iharu confused. Iharu asks if Ichikawa isn't worried about Kafka and why he agreed to transfer to another unit. Ichikawa explains he needs to get stronger fast, because he doesn't want his weakness to stop him from protecting Kafka when he returns. She's sure Kafka will come back soon. Inspired by Ichikawa's determination, Iharu decides to train harder so he doesn't fall behind. Ebina, Nakanoshima, and Minaze stumble upon Iharu and Ichikawa arguing and ask if they're also struggling to focus, given it's the day headquarters decides Kafka's fate. Minase confidently says everything will be fine, trusting the clemency letter they wrote together. Nakanoshima mentions Mina was summoned to headquarters, surprising Ichikawa, but Minase believes it's good news. When Mina arrives, she's told to wait in the meeting room since Izao is examining Kafka. She tries to sit but is told no seat is prepared for her as she's just an observer, so she remains standing. In his kaiju form, Kafka screams at Izao, and Kikoru yells at him, reminding him he's human, not a kaiju. Instead of stopping, Kafka punches Izao, who dodges and analyzes Kafka's fighting style. Izao notes Kafka attacks like an animal, leaving openings. Kafka then cuts himself in half, shocking Izao, and throws a punch with his upper body, which Izao dodges. Isao is further amazed by Kafka's self-destructive attacks, confident in his rapid regeneration. Deciding human logic won't work, Isao changes tactics. Kafka launches multiple punches at once, forcing Kikoru to shout, and Izo realizes the attack would have killed him without the number 2 shield. Isao uses a force blast to send Kafka flying, and Juzo explains to the operation room that the technique uses a sonic boom to expand its range. Isao looks up, surprised Kafka's kaiju core is gone, only to discover the body was a decoy for the core to regenerate. Kafka is exhausted from the fight and doubts he'll survive. He punches Izao again, destroying another layer of the shelter, shocking the scientists, since the shelter was supposed to withstand a fortitude of 10. Keiji says this is expected with 2 numbered kaiju clashing. Kikoru is impressed her father is facing a numbered kaiju alone. Keiji finds the fight strange, thinking if Izao wanted to kill Kafka, he could have done it when Kafka was still human. He suspects Izao is testing Kafka, which warms Kikoru's heart. She recalls her conversation with her father and wonders if he's decided to give Kafka a chance after all. On the rooftop, Ai tells Izumo that he joined the force to save lives, but Kafka saved him. He believes people shouldn't be judged by their backgrounds but by their actions, and Izumo agrees. Izumo stares at his father's contact on his phone, letting Aoi's words sink in. Kafka lunges at Isao, trying to pin him against a wall, but Isao dodges and counters with multiple blows from behind. Kafka turns around and lands lands a hit that shatters the suit on Izao's side, causing blood to spill. The blue lines on Kafka's kaiju form turn red, and Kafka realizes his strength is surpassing Isao's expectations. He knows he needs to regain control of his body, but all he can think of is giving up. Isao claps his hands together and fires at Kafka, but the attack does little damage. Kafka screams internally, begging the kaiju to stop, but kaiju don't listen to dumb losers. Kafka's kaiju form grabs Isao and slams him against the wall, making him cough up blood. Kafka watches helplessly as the kaiju squeezes Isao, knowing he'll kill him if he doesn't act. He looks at Kikoru as the kaiju picks up her father, slams him to the ground, throws him up, and slams him again. Kafka screams, not wanting to kill Isao in front of Kikoru. Kikoru remembers telling Kafka she'd kill him if he became a kaiju that kills humans. She thinks she has to do it now, but part of her still wants to believe in him, so she shouts at him not to give in to the kaiju like a brainless idiot. Kafka tries to break free from the kaiju's control, but the kaiju opens its mouth, ready to swallow him. Kafka recalls how nothing in life has ever worked out for him. The kaiju bites down, and Kafka finds himself in a pool, legless. The kaiju goes berserk in front of Isao, who feels all hope is lost. In his despair, Kafka sees Mina coming to save him from his bottomless pit, telling him she'll always be waiting. Instead of delivering the final blow as the kaiju intended, blood bursts from its back, and Kafka regains control. He tells Isao he's Kafka, not a kaiju, before collapsing and returning to his normal form. The 1st Division captain, Narumi, points his weapon at Kafka, but Isao tells him to stand down. Narumi complies and orders the other officers to do the same. He removes his mask, saying he thought Isao was trying to get himself killed by fighting alone. Isao tells Narumi not to be stupid, even if Kafka exceeded his expectations. He orders the medics to take Kafka, warning that his core might be destroyed. Narumi asks Isao what he'll do next, but Isao doesn't respond. In the meeting room, Keiji tells Mina she can give her report now that Isao's examination is done. He informs everyone that Mina has known Kafka since before he became an officer, and Mina assures them she's never shown him favoritism. Juzo tells Mina her report is just a formality and won't determine Kafka's fate, as they've already reached a conclusion. They tell her not to think her words will influence their decision. Mina says she'll leave it to them to decide if Kafka is human or kaiju, but will speak about his duties as an officer. She praises his contributions during the Sagamihara neutralization operation, where he exposed the Yoju's reproductive organs and saved the 3rd Division from a Yoju bomb. The officers argue these feats only prove Kafka is a kaiju, and Mina agrees, surprising them. She adds that Kafka's combat power was 0 when he first joined, and that he failed the entrance exam 12 times before passing as a backup. Despite being the oldest recruit, he never gave up on saving others. She recalls their childhood when she cried for Miko, and Kafka stood by her, holding her hand. Mina tells the officers that Kafka has more humanity than anyone else, and believes his heart should determine if he can be trusted as an officer. The officers disagree with her and tell her to stop covering for her subordinate, but Isao thanks her and asks her to return to her post. The officers tell Isao they're ready to dispose of Kafka and want to know his decision. Isao doesn't finish his sentence before we see Kafka in a tube, recalling his childhood with Mina and how he promised to protect her from kaijus. That's why, when he fought Isao, he decided that if he were to die, he wanted to die in his human form, not as a kaiju. Kafka opens his eyes and is surprised to find out he's alive. He's even more shocked to hear Isao's voice and see him beside his sickbed. Isao tells Kafka to calm down because he's not there to harm him, but Kafka is just grateful that Isao is alive. He doesn't know how he would face Kikoru if he had killed her father. This surprises Isao. Kafka asks if Isao and the others have accepted that he's human, but Isao points to the scar on Kafka's chest and tells him that if he truly had a heart, he would have died in battle. Isao says they decided at the meeting that he's a kaiju, but will decide later if he's a threat. At the meeting, Izo tells everyone that Kafka will fight for them and will not be turned into a weapon, but they quickly object, stating there's no precedent for it. However, Izo argues that he has seen Kafka can be controlled, and adds that Kafka has been performing missions with Division 3. He mentions they can't be certain that a weapon made from Kafka will be as powerful as he is, so it's better to keep him as a weapon. Juzo insists there's no precedent, and Izo counters that precedence is irrelevant regarding the country's defense. He reminds them of the disaster caused by Kaiju No 10 years ago, which resulted in the loss of 200 officers and 3 captains. Keiji adds that they also lost Izao's wife. Isao argues that with Kafka by their side, they might stand a chance against numerous kaijus, but the officers remain opposed. Isao challenges Kafka to prove his worth if he wants to survive, and Kafka realizes the defense force is only keeping him alive to use him as a weapon. Kafka tells Isao he sees himself as an officer and will ensure they accept him. Mina sends a text from her phone as she leaves the headquarters. Kikoru receives it and is happy to see that the disposal of Kaiju No. 8 has been postponed. However, she knows she must get stronger in case she needs to face Kafka. Aoi and Izumo also get the text, and Izumo thinks it's from the SDF, but Aoi corrects him. Izumo is thrilled that Kafka has won this battle. Ichikawa gets the message, but before he can respond, Iharu shouts beside him, "Celebrate." celebrating. Minase and Nakanoshima are also glad that Kafka has triumphed. Iharu shares the news with Ichikawa, who reminds him that he predicted Kafka would return. Ichikawa promises to be stronger when Kafka comes back. Okanogi tells Hoshina she's happy things worked out for Kafka, but Hoshina believes this is only the beginning of the tough part. He believes people will eventually discover there's a kaiju within the force, and it'll be up to Kafka to show them they can accept his help. Kafka falls asleep while talking to Isao, mumbling in his sleep for Mina to wait for him. The cleaners lose a chess game and wonder how player number 9, who joined last week, is now at the top of the board. Kaiju No 9, the player, believes he now understands humanity's intellectual level. He thinks humans acquire knowledge over generations. He's ready to move the plan to the next phase, bringing back the kaiju power that fell into human hands to their side.